For those unfamiliar, Des, could you tell us just a little bit of background of your upbringing in America, how you came to Ireland, and how the whole thing affected you?
Yeah, well, so I was actually born in London, which I never talk about because it's kind of irrelevant. My parents were just waiting for me to be born. So I was born in November 1975, and I already had my first Christmas was in New York. So like my London birth is just a kind of like an awkward thing that I have to deal with amongst my cousins from County Down. But anyway, I was raised in Queens. I was in New York. I was a Queens kid all my childhood, and then very undramatically, because it sounds more dramatic than it was, I flunked out of school. I got kicked out of school, but the reason I got kicked out of school was I failed more than 2 subjects. And my mother, who definitely had very bad anxiety, she was probably overreacting, but I get it. It seems like a big deal, your child gets expelled. It would have been a bigger deal if I got expelled for like anything very dramatic, but I literally just like had no interest in school that year. And in the end, they expel you. So in a moment of madness, my cousin who was visiting from Waterford said, "Why don't you go to boarding school in Ireland?" And I just thought this was the coolest idea ever. I said it to my mother, and they kind of laughed it off originally, but then they looked into it, and it was actually doable and certainly less expensive than boarding school in the States. But actually, it was pretty comparative to like a normal Catholic high school in New York, price-wise. So 6 weeks later, I was in Ireland. It wasn't a plan. It was like not a. And I went to visit. It was Fiona, was that cousin. I went to live with her parents at the weekend, and I was in boarding school in Wexford during the week. But like, I was just going over to these strangers. Like, none of this was well thought out.
Yeah.
But it happened, and that was a pretty life-changing experience. I was 14 years old.
Yeah. I had a similar situation when I was young, probably younger than you were when you came to Ireland. I might have been 6 or 7. I did like just a lot of energy as a kid.
Yes.
And so every summer my parents sent me down to a family farm. My mother was from Longford, and I spent 3 months down there every summer, and they took me back. And it's great at one level, but you do have to question about why was I sent away? What did I do? And when you bring it up, nobody ever tells you the right reasons.
Oh,
for
really?
It, As I say, well, you were just like, it was good to get out on the farm, But
yeah, it was great for them. They get a fucking break.
But my brother wasn't sent down.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there was so much going on with me in those those early adolescent days. And, I was drinking. I tell a joke in my show that I got kicked out of school because I had a problem with alcohol, which is actually not true. But I did have a problem with alcohol, but that's not why I was kicked out of school. But I had a lot going on. And I feel like in today's day and age, I would have been dealt with very differently. I don't mean in terms of my parents sending me over here, because I really did want to go. Like, I mean, I think they probably should have said it's not a good idea, but I did actually think it was super cool to do this. But I do think that like the way people talk about mental health these days, I probably would have been brought in and like asked what was going on. And there was a bit of bullying going on, but there also was just like my own like discontentment. I think I would have probably got better supports and not ended up over here. Now, I wouldn't change it for the world. But when I see my friends who have kids 14 years old, I think like, God, it was a lot to just send me over. And a lot of it was good, but a lot of it was bad because, I had a lot going on emotionally. And especially after that first year, like after I settled into Ireland, I really discovered ways to just like be on my own a lot, like, and just like stay at friends' houses. And I just did not have a lot of supervision in my teenage years. I had way too much freedom. Despite the fact that I was in a boarding school, I just had way too many ways to sort of live off the grid.
Yeah.
And I took full advantage, to be honest with you.
And Ireland's not a great place to come if you have a problem with drinking.
Well, that's the joke. That's the joke. But, I really feel like either place. In fact, my mother said years later, because I think maybe there was a hint of guilt, or maybe some people might have said to her, like, you think it was a bit crazy sending him over there. But she was... she had accepted that I was going to have big problems with like drugs and alcohol. She was like over dramatic.
Yeah.
And she actually felt that it would be safer for me to go through that here than there. And I mean, there is a certain amount of logic. My cousin, my oldest first cousin, my mother's nephew, he had gone through something very bad related to substance abuse. And it was all around a similar time. So I really feel like she was kind of projecting a sense of that if New York would be more dangerous and Ireland would be safer because my demons were gonna do what they do regardless.